ask them to consider an opinion that you have. You might ask them to relate a personal experience. For example, if I wanted to do audience engagement right now, I would ask you, what do you think audience engagement is? And then I would let you think about it, right? So what do you think audience engagement is?
I believe audience engagement is to get the different people to connect with a message and to reflect about what you're saying and connect with emotions, with past experiences, with new ideas, and being able to stay paying attention to you, or even providing feedback or questions or concerns about what you're telling them.
Yeah, exactly. Because right there, even there, you had to think about what it was, and then you gave a good response, a very detailed, good response on what you think audience engagement is. And that's essentially what you want to be doing when you give your speeches, right? You can pause, and then you ask your audience a question. You ask them, like, what do you think about my product? Who do you think would invest in this product? Where do you think it would be used? Do you think this is useful? Do you believe in X, Y, or Z? You can ask pretty much any question, as long as you think that this question will prompt the audience to sort of reflect on what you're saying, not just, like you said, on the specific question, but also on the materials of your speech as a whole. That's the point of audience engagement. I think usually in presentations or seminars, it's good to include some sort of activity or some sort of question every once in a while, because listening to someone talk at the front for a long time is quite hard on the mind, quite hard on the ears, even if you like really, really want to listen. So I think having an opportunity to think about what you want to say, or think about what you want the speaker, or you think the speaker is trying to say, that helps the audience sort of connect better with what you're saying, because it gives them a break from you talking and you explaining what you have to say, right? It's like in writing, they talk about show, don't tell, where you want the reader to fill in the gaps and sort of infer what exactly the meaning of what you're saying is in good writing, because that detracts from the really, really like boring way of just writing exactly what you think is happening at every single given moment. I think that's sort of what's going on here as well, because you want your audience to sort of, okay, like I was saying, you want your audience to, you want your audience to jump off what you're saying and then fill in the gaps. So for example, you might not need to explain why your product is very important if your audience already gives a good response for why your product is important. You might not need to explain why your product is sold to certain people if you ask that question and your audience thinks of the right answer. So not only does it help your audience understand your speech, it can also help you move your speech along as you realize that your audience already understands certain concepts. Yeah. Secondly, props and speech aids. These are, I would say, for this slide, I'm talking mostly about props that aren't slideshows. So for example, if you have a physical demonstration or some sort of graph, some sort of like whiteboard that you draw things on to explain your concept, this would be the slide to talk about that. These props can be almost anything. I think the definition of a prop speech is essentially anything that can be useful to your speaking. So if you find that having a broomstick helps you better explain the concept of what you're saying, if you find that having a broomstick with you is in some way related to the concept of like which pet is better, cats or dogs, then by all means, bring a broomstick to your presentation and use it in the way that you think is going to be useful. But props need to be adding to your presentation. They can't be taking away from it. If you use your broomsticks in a really distracting way, like you use your hands in a really weird and distracting way like this, that's not good. And props shouldn't be used in that way either. So for example, if you have some sort of demonstration, if I had my backpack as a prop and this was my table, I would put it on the table and I might like gesture to it, I might point to specific things on this backpack that are useful. But if my speech isn't currently related to what's on the backpack or my prop, I might just put it aside and do the talking myself, because this prop isn't meant to replace you speaking in the same way that a slideshow isn't meant to replace the speaker. So if you're finding that you're using your prop or sort of just holding on to it awkwardly when you give your speech, that's not very good, because you want your audience to focus on you, and your prop should only add to that. Your prop should only become in the focus when you need to talk about certain things on a graph or on your prop that might be otherwise hard to explain, but you don't want the audience to look at the prop instead of you. Does that make sense?
Yeah, human beings tend to follow the attention to where the hands go,
Yeah, exactly.
where the sound is. So yeah, I totally agree. You must be intentional. That's the word that I always related to. You have to be intentional with whatever you have into your space or presentation, even um, virtual or digital or physical, as you mentioned.
Yeah, exactly. Like, even if I turn away to fix the slideshow for a couple seconds, that already detracts greatly from the presentation, because being able to see me and see my hands and see that I'm giving my full attention to you and not a prop or a computer or a script, that helps a lot in selling the delivery. Whereas if you make even like the small like distractions or small break in this, it's really hard for the audience to come back in, even if they want to listen to your speech. So that's the biggest reason, I think, why props, slideshows, mannerisms, etc. can't be really, really distracting or really unrelated to your speech. That hurts your speech a lot, because it makes your audience, you know.
And you know what? It makes me think about something, and it is when you have that kind of distractions, like unwanted or
Yes.
undesired distractions, that you just come up something, I don't know, something fall down, or any strange person gets into the room. You have to be also able to handle
Yes.
that
Yes.
and catch back the attention of the audience to you, to your presentation,
Yes.
and probably be like smart enough or wise enough to capture again the audience to your point, to your presentation, and don't let them just get distracted by the whatever is happening around.
Yeah, I think that's a confidence thing mostly, because if you seem like you're really confident and you take up metaphorical space in the room, like if you're the biggest thing happening in the speaking room, then even if people come in, even if there are like distractions or weird noises happening in the side, like a fan or like the air conditioning running.
I like that phrase.
Yeah.
You are the biggest.
Yeah, like you are the biggest
thing
person in the room.
And or person
Yeah.
happening in the room.
Exactly. So as long as you like take up that presence, even if something happens in the back, they're not gonna want to turn around from you to look at those things, because you're so much more important, right? They want to hear what you have to say. They see that you're so confident that they don't want to turn away and look at other things. So that's sort of the goal when you do public speaking. Like when you watch rallies, for example, like really successful politicians who give rallies, everyone pays attention to the politician, even if there's like crazy things happening behind them, because they just like, they're really focused on what the politician has to say. And that's what you want when you give speeches. You want to seem so confident that you're like the politician. Like everyone wants to listen to the wonderful things you have to say. So much that even when like really distracting things happen in the background, there are cars on the highway, people are like running around, there's like small fires happening behind the door to the exit, like no one cares, because they're in the room with you and you're the only thing that matters. That's sort of like the end goal of public speaking, when you just want to be so confident and so sure of yourself, and presenting yourself in that way so much that people just believe in you and want to listen to you. I think this like does come to a certain extent if people already want to hear what you say, like if you have very interesting and insightful things to share. But if you just sell yourself and you also use strong body language, eye contact, the way you speak sounds confident, you use like very efficient props, you use a good clean slideshow, these aspects can all help sell your delivery to help you achieve this goal. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
What a great message. Thank you. Yeah. I've never seen, I mean, it seems pretty obvious
Yeah.
to think in that way, but way you put it into words sounds like very strong and very and really related. I mean,
Yeah, I mean, part of it is just practice, right? Like, I sound confident because I've practiced sounding confident, even if not on this particular speech. So if I say things that sound obvious, it might sound smarter to you, even if they're just like things that you know yourself and you thought of yourself. Because when I say it, it sounds like more confident and more like self-assured, right? Does that make sense? That's sort of what public speaking practice does. That's like one of the things that I think is important to practice. Just the ability to sound smart and sound confident, even if
even telling
right.
a lie.
Exactly. If you can sell yourself for anything, even if you're not really
even
sure what you're
telling
saying.
something pretty obvious,
Yes.
but you sound confident.
Exactly.
This chair is red,
Yes.
and you know it's red, and you and me were seeing.
Exactly. That chair is blue, and we can see the chair is blue, and that's what makes this chair so important. This backpack, this table, the TV, these things are all important because of, right? They're not actually important, but because you're able to sell yourself and sort of present yourself in this way and take up space in the room, people start to believe that it's important, and they don't want to turn away because they want to hear why you think this chair is important, this TV is important, even if there's no actual reason as to why. Yeah, that's public speaking.
Okay, makes sense.
Yeah. Okay, let's talk about slideshows. I think this slide is actually quite important, slide, because you will end up using lots of slideshows in your career and when you present, usually at meetings, at like interviews, at audits. You'll have a slideshow, some sort of like visual like this to present what you want to say and help the audience stay along with your presentation. I think the biggest thing when you make slideshows, like I've mentioned in previous days, is to not use text walls. By text walls, I mean slides where you have like the entire script of what you plan to say on that slide, but literally on the slide. Because like I said, everyone has eyeballs and everyone can read in English if they're here to listen to your presentation. So you want them to listen to you because they came to listen to what you have to say, not to read a slideshow while you also read the slideshow along with them. That's the biggest thing in presenting. Even if you're nervous, even if you don't prepare that well, I promise that you give off a far worse impression if you just like channel that unpreparedness into reading a slideshow rather than just not having a slideshow and giving a presentation that might be like slightly rougher around the edges in terms of content, but it's still like a presentation where you do the talking, because that's what actually allows you to do things like body language, hand gestures, eye contact, using props, etc. Because those things aren't possible if you have to glue your eyes to the screen and read a slideshow. Right, that's the biggest thing I would emphasize with slideshows. Besides that, there's some basic slideshow rules that I think are like pretty easy to follow. Just make sure you use images. These slideshows unfortunately don't have that many images because I found it difficult to put images into this format, but like if you're selling a product, if you have a service, if you work for a company that you're trying to advertise, it can be good to put images for that company, for your like object, for your product. Show specific images of specific parts when you need to talk about them. Show images of people enjoying your product when you talk about the impacts, the positive impacts of this product or this service. Just try to integrate images into your slideshow, especially if these are like professional slideshows that will matter, because you want people to have things to look at besides just text and background. So I think that's pretty important. Secondly, generally it's best to put 2 or 3 sentences per slide. So 2 or 3 sentences per slide, because you don't want people to be reading too much, but you also don't want to have literally only images. Again, because the purpose of a really good slideshow is to refocus you. So if for some reason,
for you.
Yes, for you, mainly for you.
Yes.
Because if for some reason I forgot what exactly I wanted to say on slideshows,
Key messages.
exactly, I would be able to look at this. I would be able to, like you said, key messages, right? I'd be able to see that I planned to say something about like 2 to 3 sentences or statements per slide, and that would help me remember what exactly I wanted to say under that, what exactly I had prepared for that statement, and that'll help me put me back on track. Similarly, but less importantly, I also said this before, but the audience also relies on your slide in some part, like minimalist slides with statements to also recenter themselves. Because if they aren't listening too carefully, or if they need help staying on track with your speech, being able to see what comes next or what has come and what you've already said helps a lot in terms of keeping them on track. If they sort of zoned out or lost focus when you were talking about using images, when they see that on the slideshow that you're going to talk about like the number of sentences you have to use in your slideshow, and they hear you talk about that concept seconds later, that helps them refocus back on, because now through the slideshow they're able to remind themselves that you're now talking about this point, and then that gets them back on track because they can see that now they're over here. Now there's going to be one more point on using like relatively sparse and minimalist, or like very clean. I would say clean, very not cluttered, right? And very empty slideshows, and that way they can refocus back on what you're saying. The last thing I would say is just generally you want your templates to be very sparse. I use the word sparse, but sparse just means like empty, not a lot of things going on in the background. It's not like a really distracting background with rainbows and like animated images jumping across the screen at you, because obviously your slideshow, like your props, your body language, your eye contact, needs to complement your speaking, and it can't distract from what you're doing. So if you have like a really colorful image in your background, if you have a really weirdly colored like background color, if you have really weird text color, these things don't actually help you sell your point. They just make it harder for the audience to like look at your slideshow and understand what's going on. So generally I would avoid slideshow templates that have like lots of conflicting bright colors, or slideshow templates that make it in any way harder to read the text or harder to follow along, because ultimately your slideshow should not be a work of art that your audience admires while you give your speech. Your slideshow should just be something that your audience can turn to when they need reminders on what exactly is going on. Was that your phone?
No.
Okay.
It was someone's outside.
Ah, okay, that's great. I have some examples of slideshows.
Oh.
Yes, this slideshow. What do you think is wrong with this slideshow?
It's a wall
of text, yes.
of text.
Yeah.
What you said, yeah.
Exactly.
The background doesn't even allow to identify the text.
Yes.
For example, it's full of text. Yeah, it's completely cluttered.
Yeah, exactly. I would even say that the way that this text is positioned looks weird, because like the margins are uneven. This side is far bigger than this side, and then there's like this, that side's not lined up, so it just looks like this entire box. This slideshow was made in 3 seconds. You just like put a Google Doc or a Word document and just copy paste your entire section onto a slideshow, add a weird image that is not really related to what you're saying, and then you just like put it on your slideshow, right? This sort of slideshow is not good, because not only is it really hard for the audience to follow what's going on now, it also just sells you as unprofessional. Because your slideshow looks like this, and your slideshow is this unprofessional, it makes you look unprofessional, because they assume that your speaking and your content will also match the quality.
You.
Exactly.
Yourself.
You match the quality of what you put out. So
Quality.
yeah, because if the quality of what you put out is this abomination of a slideshow, then
Abomination.
you're not going to make a good impression on who you want to impress. Conversely, I think this is an example of a good, decent presentation. Like obviously the background is a little weird. I don't want to like self-flex too much. I think this slideshow that we've been looking at so far is also not bad, because the slideshow that I've been using to teach public speaking does have like a white background, relatively very minimalist background actually, because the only color there is on the edges. That's fine, and the text is really big for you to be able to read at a large distance. It's always in black and white. The text always black or I think it's like dark yellow, and that helps you concentrate. This slideshow, I would not make your slideshow purple like this. I don't think it's a good color for slideshows. But like even though the slideshow is purple, you can still read the text. You can still read the text because it's in white. It's not too bad. Could be worse. There's not that many distracting things going on. Like the text is relatively decently sized. I think it could be bigger. You could put an image here to make this slideshow better. But I think overall, if you treat my slideshow as like a good example and the previous one as a bad example, this one might be like a decent example, something that is like it's okay, right? It's okay, better than the previous examples. Yeah.
Right.
Obviously, your slideshow quality shouldn't be something you spend lots of time on, but your slideshow should be something that reflects the quality of what you have to say. And because you always want to be saying good and useful things, your slideshow should always seem like it's like well made, well polished, even if it might be like somewhat obvious that you didn't spend hours and hours making a slideshow. It shouldn't be a slideshow that immediately jumps out to people as, oh, this person has no idea how to make slideshows. Does that make sense?
Completely.
Yeah. Okay.
Thanks.
The next thing I have is actually a video on video about public speaking that I think is useful, because this man uses everything that I've been talking about so far. He uses like the slideshow, he uses body language. I just need to find this real quick.
It's okay.
Yeah.
Take your time.
Thanks. We'll watch it, then we'll quickly discuss what we think is good about the. Oh my goodness, why is it not on the screen? Huh.
Yeah.
Okay.
You have to pass it to the next screen.
Okay.
Just, yeah, more. Yeah, it's coming. Yes. Yeah, no, go back. No, yeah, right, it's good.
Oh, there, okay. It's a little hard to track because my laptop is behind the screen, but here it is. Wow, okay. Thanks.
Afternoon, everybody. Everybody here has been incredibly kind and well.
Sorry?
Sorry, I was going to make a question.
What's the question?
Do you have like a top 3 or 5 best public speaking people that you follow and you use to learn from that you might recommend?
Learning public speaking? I think okay, let me put this away real quick. I think usually there are some politicians who are really good at speaking. I think regardless of your opinion on his policies, Obama is a really good public speaker because he speaks slowly, he speaks clearly. He speaks much slower than me. Obviously, I think like speaking fast, speaking slow is just one of those things that you do, and it's not good to speak too fast, it's not good to speak too slow, but as long as your audience understands you and they don't have a problem following what you have to say, it's okay, right? The way he speaks is very clear. He uses lots of emphasis on words that are important. He pauses a lot. I think that's also important. Obviously, we all have weaknesses when we publicly speak. I think pausing and like pacing is one of mine. But ultimately, as long, again, as you are able to learn something from watching public speakers, that's what matters. Besides him, I think a lot of like the most famous speeches are good examples of public speaking. Like if you watch, Ronald Reagan is also a very good public speaker, even though he's on the opposite end of the political spectrum from Obama. He gives very compelling speeches because he was a radio host when he was younger, when he wasn't a politician. So that helped him a lot. If you watch his presidential address from 1981 or 1980, 1984, like the speeches that he gives every year, the president will give a speech every year to the American people on the day that he is sworn into office. So every year on that anniversary for 4 years, he goes in and gives a speech. If you listen to those speeches, they're like 50 minutes long, but he keeps a consistent and strong delivery through all of them, so that's very good. Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream, of course, is a great speech because it's very like
I have.
moving,
Yes.
and he's a very like passionate public speaker, especially in that speech.
Mhm.
But you'll also notice that like Obama, like Reagan, he speaks relatively slowly. He uses lots of pauses. He makes sure,
Intonation.
yeah, intonation. He emphasizes certain ideas. Like I have a dream. He says that over and over again to emphasize different ways in which his dream of like black people being equal to white people in America can become true because kids are able to play, because now they're able to use the same utilities, use the same services, and all of these like techniques that he uses to sell his delivery are good to listen to. Besides that, like if you just search up good speeches, if you go on like TEDx and you search up very good speeches on TEDx, like good speeches normally means the ones that have the most views. And generally, as long as you click on a speech that isn't like very academic, speeches about like life, speeches about poetry, about the English language, about public speaking, about like personal stories, those will usually have good public speaking if they have like large views. Just like if you want to listen specifically for public speaking and not for the content of the speeches necessarily, I would avoid the ones that have lots of views but are about like very academic topics. So if you want to listen to a speech about like calculus that has 1 million views, it might not be the best quality public speaking because people watch the video for the math, not for the public speaking. So if it's a guy reading off a slideshow, like it's okay because you're here to listen to what he has to say, right? But for general public speaking, I would listen to there's one video about a guy who I believe tried to commit suicide and then failed, and then he became a motivational speaker. So his TED Talk is about his journey to becoming who he is now. I think those sorts of TED Talks, I've watched a few, those are good for public speaking because these people are often like professional public speakers, professional motivational speakers. Even though they're not like famous politicians who are famous for giving good speeches, they can often be good speeches to watch because, you know, it's nice seeing people who seem, number one, like more regular, more down to earth give speeches, and number two, because they're just like still very well trained, they're still professional public speakers. So it's nice to be able to see how exactly they speak and what mannerisms they use, that sort of thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you for that detailed response. Thank you very much.
Let me try to get this video working.
Yeah, it's ready to click on.
Just to find where my cursor is. Here it is. Okay, let me just turn the volume down. I think the volume's a little loud right now. That's why. Okay, let's try this.
Coming. I parked the car, I came out the car park and somebody immediately came up to me, asked me what I was up to, said she'd look after everything, and then she said, I hope it goes well. And I thought, I haven't really focused on going well, what it actually means here today. And I guess if you're not feeling terribly positive, it means not forgetting what you're going to say, which would be quite helpful. It means nobody laughing at you, unless you're trying to tell a joke. And it means not looking over and seeing people falling asleep, looking at their phones, or generally ignoring you. So and those are, by the way, 3 of the biggest fears of people subconsciously when they're about to speak in public. So I'm going to set my sights just a tiny bit higher than that and say that I would love it, as the only thing you take away from this talk, that next time you have to give a speech or a presentation, or you're talking in a seminar or whatever it might be, that you just remember those 2 cups of coffee. And for the non-coffee drinkers amongst you, peppermint tea, even a beer is absolutely fine. Because the sad truth is that however hard we work at what we're going to say, however much we learn the facts and the figures and all these things, that a typical member of this audience tomorrow, this time tomorrow, I will be amazed if you remember more than one thing I've said, or more than one thing that any of the other amazing speakers with their brilliant stories have said, because we just live in such a phenomenally noisy, busy world. We've got WhatsApps and streams and apps and things to watch and things to do and things to learn, and we've got dates to go on and games to go to. By this time tomorrow, these talks will be a distant memory. And it's extraordinary how our brains are relatively selective about what we remember. Now, this doesn't help, and I include myself in amongst this. This doesn't help the nervous public speaker. Now, that fear is a real problem, because it means that we approach our speeches already worried about how we're going to look and sound. And it's why often we do things that are a bit unlike us. Some people just start talking really, really quickly and they get through their content, they just can't stop. And other people freeze and they just stand absolutely still, and all the energy drains from them and they start to talk in a monotone. Isn't so great for being heard. This is the fight or flight response. And it means that when we are under pressure and we feel that spotlight on us, we just start to behave in very unnatural ways. Now, this is where I come back to the cup of coffee. Because if after this I bump into one or two of you at the canteen, we have a chat, and you ask me what I'm doing for the rest of the weekend, I hope, if you had a football shirt on, I might say I'm looking forward to watching a game on telly, and I might give you the absolute highlight of what I'm up to, see if it connects, see how you react. I might say, God, I'm knackered after all that prep for TED. I'm going to spend the rest of the weekend watching box sets on TV. What I probably wouldn't say is, thank you so much for asking that question. I'm going to break the weekend down into 12 points. And I'm going to talk through each point one by one and break the weekend into segments. But before I do that, I'd like to introduce the concept of the weekend. And I'd like to talk about the weekend as a post-industrial concept, because it didn't really exist before the Industrial Revolution. If I talk like that, would you think of slightly unusual? And we sort of laugh about this stuff, and I laugh about it a lot, but actually, when we're under pressure, particularly in a professional situation or a student having to give a seminar that really matters, we start to talk in that way. Now, let me tell you about 2 jobs I've done relatively recently. And I will keep the names and the places anonymous to protect the innocent. So a few months ago, I went to another university campus where the human resources team had asked if I would help 6 of them develop their communication skills. And it was one of those days, sometimes people in these groups don't really want to go on a course, they're very busy, you can get quite a frosty reception because people don't want any sense of criticism. But on this day, I turned up and the sun was shining, and I arrived, and the head of human resources came up to me, phenomenally friendly. She did everything but hug me. She offered me a drink, she took me inside, she told me a story about how one of her kids had dropped ink all over her school uniform before she'd left that morning. She made me feel completely at ease, and I knew instantly it was going to be a great day. And she introduced me to her colleagues, and we all had a chat about worries and what we had to do when we spoke in public. And then I said, right guys, it's time to do it. Let's, each of you, you've got a minute or 2 to prepare, but could you for 1 minute talk to me about something important that's going on at work at the moment, and the other 5 will be your audience, and I will also pull out a camera, and the camera is going to film you just to put you under that little bit of pressure. And I said, we'll call her Jane, the head of HR. I said, Jane, would you like to go first? She said, no, not really. So I said, go on, you're the leader here, Jane. And this is what happened to this charismatic woman. She said, well, there are a number of reasons we're here today, and the important thing is the LRUs. And I'm going to talk about the needs of LRUs and what they need. And she went on like this for a minute, and at the end, everyone gave her a little polite round of applause. And I turned to her colleagues and said, guys, what is an LRU? And I got some blank faces and said, Jane, what is an LRU? And she went, oh, it's a learning receptor unit. Now, anyone know what a learning receptor unit is? Guys, you are all learning receptor units right now. A learning receptor unit is somebody on a course or a delegate at a talk in the small print in the HR department of this place. And what had happened is Jane had turned from this incredibly charismatic speaker, having coffee with me beforehand, but she had failed a coffee shop test. When she was under pressure, she started speaking like some sort of corporate robot. Now, I get paid to do some very odd things. And a little before that, I was asked by one of the big transport providers in the country if I'd go and sit in their boardroom where 30 very stern-looking middle-aged people with laptops and notepads receive presentations of 5 minutes each from a bunch of very senior engineers, and each engineer is coming in to ask for money for a new project. And this group has to decide, it's like the gladiators in the amphitheatre. That means they get the money and they go on, and that means you have to go and find something else to do. The first guy, call him Jim, wasn't his name. Jim walks in and he flusters around and he puts up a slide which has got notes and graphs and numbers and charts and God knows what else. And again, I'll paraphrase, but he stood there and just went, well, I'm going to talk about the footbridge. We've got to get through a number of, there's a number of reasons we need it. I'm going to talk about the background. I'm going to give you an introduction to the subject. I'm going to get, and he went on and on. And with about 4.5 minutes gone, he then said, and what really matters is the type of material we use to build the bridge. And it was, to be honest, beyond me at this point, but it was something steel or aluminium or iron or some choice. And then he finished. And there was an intense debate for about 2 minutes amongst two of the team, the board of this organisation, about which type of metal would be better. And at the end of the session, they had a vote. Poor old Jim, he'd asked for £1 million to keep his team busy building this footbridge. And after the session had finished, I went down to their canteen. I spent a lot of time in coffee shops. And I saw him sitting alone, looking a bit miserable. And I said, mate, do you mind if I just have a quick chat about how it went? He said, why did you need the footbridge built? And he said, because there's a junction on a bend near this very, very busy transport system, and it sits between the housing estate and the local school. And every morning our CCTV catches kids sprinting across the junction trying to get to school because they haven't got time to go up the road another half mile to go over the footbridge that's already there. And we reckon in the last couple of months, 3 kids have almost died. They've been inches away from dying, and this footbridge would have saved their lives. And I said, why didn't you tell them that? He said, oh, no, but you have to be more professional than that. You have to go through all the detail. And this board clearly didn't have a clue that this was the reason, and they turned down something on the base of the material he would have used for a footbridge. They weren't even engineers, rather than the need to save children's lives. Again, he'd failed the coffee shop test. And ultimately, the more pressure we are under and the higher the stakes are, be they your friend's 21st birthday party, be they a job interview where you're speaking to a panel, be they a TED talk where you've been planning to get your great idea over to the world for years and years and years, you've got to appeal to people's human side. And what we do in a coffee shop completely naturally is we think about our audience and we are relevant to them and to their needs. We think entirely about we don't even think about using our natural charisma because it happens. We just appeal to their better nature and we tell them things they think they will enjoy. And that starts with stories. Even the most complicated subjects come to life when we tell a story. I'm sure recently all of you are aware of the post office scandal that's gone on in the UK. Everyone know what I'm talking about. And the Horizon software that has ruined the lives of people who are working honestly in post offices, these sub-postmasters. You'd think this was news, but actually this has been going on for 20 years. And I like to try and keep up with current affairs, but I couldn't miss, this thing has been in private eye, it's been in Sunday newspapers, it's gone through the high courts, it's been inside the papers, but always on a very technical, mathematical, legal basis. All that's happened in the last 2 months is there was a TV show about it. But the TV show didn't focus on the facts and the figures at the beginning anyway. It focused on people, an emotional connection to those people. And we saw how these lives, through storytelling, had been completely and utterly transformed. And within weeks, the Prime Minister is promising hundreds of millions of pounds of compensation without even having a vote in Parliament. That is the power of storytelling. Now, I'm not saying the detail doesn't matter, and some of you, I'm sure, are doing the most phenomenally complex academic subjects that you're going to need to talk about as you graduate and go into careers. But still, the way you would describe that subject to a friend over a coffee is a brilliant way to introduce it to an audience who may need you to give them a lot of information, but still need to be hooked in this busy world where they are so easily distracted. And the coffee shop thing continues again and again and again. It's a benchmark for everything. When we talk to our friends, we look at the benefits of a problem rather than its features. So I went to the GP some time ago. I had a tummy ache that had been going on for days, and I just began to get a bit worried about it. And the GP does what GPs do, and prodded around and asked me questions. It was all a bit mucky. And then typed some stuff into his computer and then looked at me and said, Mr. Bernstein, I think you've got a problem with electrolytes and pathogenic bacteria. And I can promise you, my sort of mild state of worry turned into complete panic. And I can remember the hairs on the back of my neck stood. I thought, oh my God, this is it. I'm finished. And I said, what does that mean? And he said, well, I think it's food related. And I said, well, I'm not going to die of food poisoning. He said, no, I think you'll be fine by the weekend. Now, what he had done is used his technical knowledge to give me the facts before he'd actually explained the context and the benefit to me. And had he gone about it the other way and said, Mr. Bernstein, you're going to be absolutely fine. I think it's food related. I would have said, well, what is it? And he would have told me all about his electrolytes and I would have been fascinated. But in a coffee shop, the first thing you ask your friend is how they are, and they will either say they're great or they're not so great. They won't go into the technical medical detail, and if they are, you probably wouldn't be having a coffee with them in the first place. The other thing we do when we go into a coffee shop is we talk about our key message. We talk about the subject. We don't leave it until, 10 minutes before we're due to leave. We let them know that we're going to talk about the match, or we ask them if they saw the TV show, or we ask how their date went last night before we get into the minutiae of what they might have worn, or what they had for their starter. Again, we get to the key message, and in my case, the key message is simply that we waste too much time worrying about the symptoms of public speaking worry, which are things like shaking and looking like this and breathing too quickly, and we try and cure those, when in fact they're not the problem. It's a bit like going to the doctor when you've got hay fever and lots of sneezing and saying, can you help me? And they say, yeah, get a softer tissue. It doesn't really stop you sneezing. What you want is the antihistamine. And for public speaking, the antihistamine is your content. And if you talk to a group of people the same way you would talk to a friend, you will find your natural charisma and energy comes to life. You'll start to move your hands without thinking about it, because that's what you do when you're on the telephone to a friend. And you will find that instantly thinking about those cups of coffee will relax you and make you more confident next time you have to go and speak in public. Thank you very much.
Wow. What a wonderful speech.
It's a good speech. All right, let me,
What's the name of that one?
let me check. I'm struggling to use the computer through the projector screen. Here. The name is The Trick to Powerful Public Speaking, Lawrence Bernstein.
The truth? Oh,
The trick.
Trick. To powerful.
Public speaking.
Powerful. Speak. Lawrence Bernstein.
Yeah.
Okay. Perfect. What?
Okay. The last thing I have for today is an exercise, like the one we did yesterday, where I had you talk about what motivates you. This one's similar, but before that, do you have any questions about anything I've said, anything on it?
I've been giving my questions during the session, so
Great.
at this point, I don't have any additional.
Sure. Let me sit over here like yesterday, and I'm gonna go through the prompt that I have prepared. So yesterday was about motivation. Today, I was thinking we could talk about an experience that made you stronger, or a time that you faced a major setback and recovered. So you can think about it and then just try to talk to me like you're at a coffee shop again. You're just like, I'm your friend, I'm here to listen to what you have to say, and then you want to sound confident and you want to sound like someone that I'm gonna trust and believe in, okay?
Thank you.
Whenever you're ready.
When I listened this question or this prompt, something that came up to my mind is definitely the experience of coming and migrating to Canada. Is definitely something that made me stronger, and at the same time, it's like a time of in my life that I've been experiencing several setbacks and challenges that I have to overcome once and over again. The last 3 years have been the most challenging and different time of my life. You know, I've been, before coming here, I had a life, and I, of course, lived different stages in my life. Like, I had a son, I got married, I complete my career, and that implies different challenges, but nothing like coming and migrating to another different culture and country. And I believe the key to recover over and over again has been to have a positive mindset first, like thinking I am capable, I can come around, I can overcome this, this is just another challenge that I'll be fine after living through this, and I'll have just learnings after this. And that's the first one, like stay positive, think that there is more and everything will be fine after coming through, and there is alternatives to come through that specific challenge. The second one is to see that it is worth it, that everything is happening for something, that I am learning something when I am facing any challenge. So I'm learning, and something good after all is coming out from that specific situation. And a third one for sure is that after being this age, after living all those different setbacks, experiencing those things, you learn like it wasn't, or it isn't that important or that difficult, or you learn how to handle and how to hustle through difficulties. That's, I believe, part of the mindset. You grow mindset. You develop through those experiences. So that's pretty much my biggest experience that definitely have made me grow and be stronger as a human being.
That was very good. I think it was already better than yesterday's presentation, even though yesterday's was also good. Because I think right now you sound more confident and more sure of what you have to say. Because it's like, maybe it's content that comes easier to you. Maybe it's because you practiced. But I think like the way you presented to me was even more compelling, because I don't have to think about like anything else. I can just get myself immersed in your story and what you have to say about motivation and struggle and like sort of working through hardship as you move to Canada. What I would say as feedback is, I think, how do I word this? The structure of what you're saying is kind of broad at times, because you talk in very wide generalities or like very general content about your experience in Canada, and you give multiple points that end up circling back to the same broad idea of working through struggle. And this is good, and like obviously this prompt is just one prompt, but especially if you want to talk for longer or talk about more things in your speeches besides this one, I think normally even in that speech that we watched, the TED Talk, people usually go into more detail on, for example, specific personal anecdotes that they think will help the audience understand what they're trying to say, or help sell the moral, like sell the sort of end goal of their story. Because obviously you're teaching me through your speech that hustling and working through problems that are very important at the time but end up seeming less important over time, it's really like important, and that's the main thing that you learned through the process of moving to Canada and experiencing these hardships, right? If you wanted to turn this into a TED Talk, for example, or you wanted to give a speech about this or really anything else, and you want to make it just the slightest bit more compelling, it can be a good idea to integrate some sort of anecdote, like describe a time when this happened to you, and then describe the specific way.
For example, one day, these and these.
Yeah, for example. Like the process of language learning, for example. You might talk about how it's been to come to Canada and then improve your English over time and how it felt at the beginning versus the end. And that might be one example of a story that you use to tell me about like struggles as you move to Canada and how you overcome them by hustling, like you said. Yeah, that's like one thing I think that could make these speeches go from good to great, right? But besides that, I think again it's just like you should practice with your confidence, because you're clearly very confident with me, because it's like a coffee shop environment, right? Like I'm here to listen to your story and I love what you have to say, but maybe in a room of like 50 people, 100 people, it'll feel differently to you. So I think what's important here is to practice having this same attitude of, oh, it's just I'm talking to Ethan, right? I'm talking to someone who's here to support me and listen to what I have to say. But in a room of like more people that might seem scarier, even though they're all still here, like Ethan, to just sit in the room and listen to what you have to say. That's like the other thing I would say. Practice in the mirror, try to, like the man in the TED Talk said, think of it like a coffee shop interaction. So even if there's 100 people, 1,000 people listening to you talk about your cybersecurity job, or like what your plans for the future, for example, it's still the same coffee shop interaction, and you should still focus on the most important, relatable things to people. Like be confident in your stories, in your relationships with people, in the way that you deliver content that's simple, easy to understand, people believe you. That's the main thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Okay.
definitely, completely.
Do you have any other questions?
No, I'm okay. I'm okay. Very good feedback. You're right. I keep rambling around the same broad idea, and it is because I didn't provide any like a specific example that could make my prompt stronger and more believable.
Yeah.
And also the idea of like I feel confident right now with you here. Try to extrapolate
Exactly.
that feeling
Yes.
when I am with a bigger room.
Yeah.
And it is one way to get that is practicing my voice, practicing my confidence.
Yes.
As you
Right.
say, in front of the mirror, having more interactions. That's why I'm here as well.
Right, because I remember on the first date you said that you came here because you struggle with presenting to others in ways that like lots of people, you
Yes.
struggle with like public speaking to people
Yes.
because you don't feel confident in those situations.
Yes.
So I do this practice to make sure that you feel confident speaking with me, a public speaking, like I guess seminar giver, and that way you can practice feeling confident when you give speeches. And then from there, then like the very simple next step is just to sort of extrapolate, like you said, extrapolate that feeling to situations when you're public speaking, for your job, for your life, for your family, your friends, etc. Like just think of what it's like to give these talks where you just talk about what you want to say, talk about topics that come easily to you, and then put that feeling onto times when you talk about things that you've prepared. Talk to like audiences that you might not know as well, even though these audiences also just want to hear what you say. So that's the biggest thing with public speaking. I think that's like what should be practiced here. Yeah.
That's correct. Okay, thank you very
You
much.
have an interview to catch in 15 minutes, you said, a meeting?